Okay, well I guess I'm a bit unique because I'm not a mining guy at all, but the presentation was quite interesting. Except for I will say we do have a product we launched 2 weeks ago that will double the life of your man camp roofs and make you a lot of power. Anyway, so ClearVue is a technology company and we often get confused for being a glass company or something like that, but what we really are is an advanced building material company. All of our products have to be a building material first. They have to pass the right fire certification, they have to pass the right, be able to do the structural loading, the wind loading, all the things you need to make it a building material. BIPV is not like a rooftop solar panel stuck on the side of a building. That sort of just doesn't work. So what problem are we addressing? Well, buildings make 40% of the world's carbon emissions. So when we're talking about greenhouse gases and global warming, buildings are 40% of the problem. If you put that into perspective, if we're all driving Teslas tomorrow morning, that would impact the world's carbon emissions by about 13%. So even though we talk a lot about cars and CO2, buildings are a massive part of the planet's problem. 10% of that is in the actual carbon embedded into the building material itself, the bricks or the concrete or the steel, and 30% is because we don't like to be cold and we don't like to be hot. And so therefore we use air conditioning and heating to keep our buildings where we like to be. So our products have to do two things. Not only do they have to be able to generate power, we also have to be able to save power. So our products need to be able to deliver the right thermal characteristics and higher insulation values and better solar heat gain control, so we use less air conditioning in the building to begin with. So in our case, rather than looking at veins of rock and stuff like that, our goals are pretty clear, right? And we already know the path we have to walk to success. And some of this, all the cities in the world, most countries have a net zero goal. And a lot of them are prepared to throw a fair bit of money at it, which we'll get to in a little bit when we get to our strategy slide. But most countries in the world have committed to net zero by 2050. And that is a pretty big commitment even at 2050. And many countries, of course, much earlier than that. And when I was listening to the lithium presentation, I go to China a lot because we manufacture a lot of our stuff in China, and you can see the take up. And I was recently at a conference in China, or in Hong Kong actually, that the Hong Kong government have invited me to, and they really are leading the world in this space, not just in batteries and electric cars and stuff that we can see, but for example, they already have 20% hydrogen in their residential gas. So when people are cooking their dinner, that is 20% green hydrogen already in the Hong Kong gas system. And it's really interesting we do a lot with the Hong Kong government. I think I've got 3 speaking things in the next month or so. And it's very interesting to see the commitment to this technology and how we're going to cut carbon in that part of the world, compared unfortunately to us and other Western countries. So what's our product range? So we make a range of solar vision glass. We make a range of what we call solar spandrel glass, which basically goes, a spandrel glass is, if you're seeing a building being built, we've got the concrete floor, and normally we have the window, the spandrel covers the concrete part. And because we don't have to make it transparent, we can make a lot of power from that. We do solar cladding, so this comes in all sorts of colours. We can make it look like granite, and in fact our latest stuff, it looks like marble, but it also feels like marble, and it's a solar panel. Balustrade, of course, and skylights. Whoops, you're not supposed to see that slide. I must take out the wrong one. So what does that mean? So first thing in building is the architect, right? The architect spends a lot of time, design, colour, all those things. And he doesn't want a company like ours along and saying, well, you can have power, but it's got to be black. So this is an example building where on the left-hand side, the colour swatches are from the architect. On the right-hand side is the colour swatches from our products, which are solar panels. So, and it's not only just a question of the colour, it's also a question of how we deploy it. So we have to be able to do exactly the same deployment so we can make the BIPV disappear on the building. And that requires some pretty smart engineering. So we made, in particular, I don't know how many guys know about solar panels, but we made some special junction boxes so that we can seal that in a hot cavity. Because, you know, engineering-wise, you know, most of us, we take buildings for granted, right? But in a hot day, the cladding on a building can be 90 degrees. The cavity behind the cladding can be 70 degrees, and the diode in a solar panel like 65 to 120 degrees. So if the diode goes out of spec, it can be a fire risk, and it's also a reliability issue. So we designed some special junction boxes that keep themselves cool in that environment. So what's the prize? So this is an archetype that we did on a 40-story building, you know, what would happen if you used our product. And tomorrow, in fact, this will be a little bit dated, so when you guys get up in the morning and have a look at our symbol and see what announcement comes tomorrow, but we have a pretty major technological announcement tomorrow. But anyway, this, we evaluated this in 15 cities. And we did a lot of testing in Hong Kong. We deployed glass in the engineering and maintenance department of the government in Hong Kong. And we did measurements and stuff. And this archetype modelling was actually part of the Hong Kong government's report on that testing that was published. So we talk about WWR as window to wall ratio, like how much is glass and how much is wall. But all those 15 cities, the building could make between 50 and 120% of its power or its power demand. So we're talking about a building that's able to power itself. And we have projects at the moment in Melbourne. We've got a good one that is in for council approval at the moment, where the building is making more power of its own walls and stuff that it's there already, that we have to have anyway, than it's using. So in that case, I think the demand was 1.25 million kilowatt hours per annum, and we can make 1.265 million kilowatt hours just out of the existing building surfaces. And so in our product, I guess, these are some of the projects we've done, and 100 St George's is just about being completed in the fitting at the moment. We're doing the roof light on that angled point on the top of the Tattersalls building. We did solar skylights in the World Bank building in Nigeria. And for you mining guys and the prefab sort of man camp type stuff, we did a new product which has a metal back sheet that's easily cleaned, works in high dust environments, and makes the roof trafficable, reduces the air conditioning you need in the unit by about 30%, and produces enough power, more power in fact, than the unit actually needs. So what's our market opportunity? Well, as you know, everywhere's got buildings, so it's a pretty big market. But what is compelling for us in the first instance is the Asian geographies. And the reason for that is because in Singapore, Hong Kong and Seoul, there are very large subsidies. So when we did the archetype building in Hong Kong, the payback for that building was 4.6 years. So that was without government subsidies. So that means if I built a building, normal one, or I built one with our solar stuff, the payback on the generation alone was 4.6 years. With the government subsidies in Hong Kong, that payback was 2.6 years. And I'm talking about a real payback figure. I'm talking about it's installed, it's plugged in, and it's producing power. So I think with a 30-year product life, and we warrant the product for 30 years, we warrant that the product will produce 80% of its power at the end of a 30-year period, then this is, I think, a pretty reasonable investment. And it should also say that those paybacks we're talking about there are at today's power price. And if there's one thing you can believe in, which is a lot easier than commodities, I think, we all know that electricity is getting more expensive. I don't think there's been a year since I've been alive that electricity has got any cheaper. So that is, I think it augurs well for our product. The Middle East, so in the Middle East we have license agreements with the two largest glass processing facade companies. They have about 40% market share. And in the Middle East, why the payback is not so wonderful, the governments are motivated there to use green energy. So there are tax credits and stuff that make sense to deploy green energy on buildings. And because we have such a good licensee footprint there, we think that's a good focus market. And then in Australia, what's driving it in Australia? So in our case, the government 20 years ago, or maybe 25 years it might be, set up a system which basically gives you carbon credits if you install solar. And I'm sure many of you guys have got solar on your roof at home. And in a small one like that, you get some money up front. It's called an STC. And then if you're doing a big solar farm, or if you have a warehouse, got a lot of power, it's called an LGC. Now these subsidies run out in 2030, but what's driving the thing in Australia is that the occupancy of buildings. So I don't know if you guys know this, but maybe you should have a look if you don't. The government ESG reporting targets are becoming quite onerous in the next 5 years, where you have to, how much carbon are you using to run your business, all this sort of stuff is going to become a thing. And buildings in Australia are rated under the NABERS system, so you have like 6-star neighbours, 5-star neighbours. So in Melbourne, for example, if you have a 5 or 6-star neighbours rated building, the occupancy in those buildings is about 92%. If you have a 4, 3 or 2-star neighbours rate, the occupancy in those buildings is only 70%. And these days, when people are looking to finance buildings, the green star rating on the building is super important. And it's not because the bank wants to be wonderfully green. It's because they're worried about if they have to resell it if something happens. So commercially, it's more being driven in Australia. And we get a lot of inquiry today for, you know, oh, I'm building this tower, I need 100.75 kilowatts. And that 100.75 kilowatts will get them to a 6-star neighbours. So this is the way that the government policy drives the take-up of the product, I think. And then, of course, Europe and the USA. The USA being, of course, a smidge tricky lately. So what's our business model? So as a technology company, what we do is we design the special widgets that enable us to do the particular deployments, to enable us to deliver what the construction industry requires. So in our case, we do things much like Apple. So when Apple designs the phone, they OEM it in India these days and also in China. We do the same thing. And we do that because the factories we work with are at scale. So we manufacture the solar components, the tricky stuff that we do. We manufacture the front pane of the window that we can turn into a double glazed unit or a triple glazed unit. And we have our own glass processes, and we can produce many thousands of metres. I think our current capacity in total is about 90,000 square metres a month, but we haven't invested $1 in machinery or capital. So we designed this business on a capital light model. So we have large licensees. Max Blue, our licensee in China, can produce 30,000 square metres of double glazed units a day. They have 10 IGU production lines. Alutech and Emirates, as I said, they're the biggest in the Middle East. We have Viridian Glass in New Zealand, which is a 40% market share. And over the next 12 or 18 months, there'll be a lot more population in our geographic footprint of people who can manufacture for us and deliver our products into local markets. The other thing that, of course, is important is, in the capital sense, is two things. Number one, if we go to a licensee, BIPV is such a new thing and it's emerging. So we can't expect that the licensee is going to invest $10 million on a new production line just to make BIPV. So we have to make our stuff integrate to existing production lines. So for the moment, the only thing that the licensee has to buy is a machine where we verify the generation for quality control once the glass is processed, which costs about $250,000. Other than that, it works on as per normal industry norms, basically. And then the other thing that makes us capital light, because building materials like mining, I guess, is expensive when you're buying stuff, is that we match our terms with the OEM. So if I was to get a very large order tomorrow, the payment terms between the end user and us and then our OEM manufacturers are parallel, so therefore I don't have a big capital requirement. Attraction and competitive edge. So we have world-leading advancements in our products. So again, people think, well, you know, it's a piece of glass or it's a piece of cladding or it's a piece of something. But to deploy it, of course, we have to meet certain standards. And one of those standards, which we have the best certificates in the world, is building fire. So for the moment on 100 St George's, for example, we are replacing combustible cladding with solar glass. So fire ratings in buildings is like super important, because if the building catches fire, there needs to be enough time for everyone to get down the lift or out the escalator. And so these combustibility ratings are massively important, and these are unique to us. We have the best ones in the world. The other key certifications are the seal and the glass. So when we do a double glazed unit, and it needs to be airtight or gas tight if we're doing argon, we've developed a technology to be able to pass wires through that seal. And that makes it easy to install. So all of our stuff works in existing framing. So you don't need to go buy some special frame or whatever. You can use the one you got now, pretty much. And the certifications EN 1279 and ATSM 2190, they are the seal tests. So that's like an accelerated aging. So it goes into a chamber and they heat the glass to 80 degrees and take it down to -40, and they do that 5,000 times. And if there is any condensation in the glass, then you fail. And in the case of the EN 1279, they do it 2,500 times, but they weigh the desiccant inside the window. So we use a desiccant when we seal the window to remove air vapour from the piece, for water vapour in the air. And once it's cycled, if the desiccant is over a certain percentage, the weight increases too much, then the piece fails. So we've passed all of that testing with the technology we developed in Perth, actually. And I believe we're the only company that has that technology in the world. I haven't seen it anywhere else. And this year I went to the Beijing Glass Show and also to Senec, which is the biggest solar show in the world, and didn't see anything like it. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. So OEM strategy means low capital intensive, high volume production. We also have been able to make a system, if you like, that enables us to R&D very quickly. So I believe today we have maybe a 2 to 3 year lead on everybody else in the BOPV industry in terms of product specification and deliverability. So, but we need to be able to keep that. And we've been able to work with a number of people to be able to innovate quite quickly. And I think that's been a key. All those products that I just sort of showed, goodness, this mic is awful. We did all of that in the last 2 years. The junction box we developed over about 9 months, I think. And then we've done some project-specific stuff, like a spider glass, which is the glass you see with holes drilled in, and we made a way so you can't see any cabling in the solar and stuff. We can do things quite quickly. And the other thing is, we also employ people who monitor those supply chains. So when we are producing, we have a very detailed QA/QC, and we employ people on the ground who go to the factories and inspect every batch of materials before they're shipped. And then the last part, I suppose, is strategic partnerships. So we're a new industry, really, and we're also a fairly new company. And we have some excellent partnerships. We have a partnership agreement with a company called Urbas, which are some of Australia's leading sustainability engineers. We have an exclusive partnership with Landglass. Landglass is one of the world's largest manufacturers of tempering machines, but they also make a special type of glass which we're going to see deployed a lot more in the future, and that is vacuum glass. So in the middle of your glass, normally you have your laminate. Instead of a laminate, it's a vacuum. And this has massive advantages. It's unbelievably insulative, so it's like maybe this thick, and it has the same U value as a 1.5 metre thick brick wall. And so this, we already did some joint product testing in Hong Kong, and we have a R&D joint venture we're establishing in China to R&D together. So this is a really game-changing thing in the building industry. And of course, we're working with Colliers, CBRE, SRG and some major glass processes to enhance our product. So we've just undergone a bit of a management refresh, and really what we're trying to do is to really get our strategy out there in a clear way. So everybody in our team and all of our stakeholders, shareholders and our partners understand what our strategy is very clearly, and how we intend to go to market and how we intend to broaden the demand for our products. Second thing is we have to be operationally excellent. We don't get to make a mistake. If one of our products fails, it won't be because a normal window would have failed anyway. It'll be because it's a solar window. So we have to be better than the next guy to make sure that that doesn't happen. And I think the other thing is we've been resetting milestones, and we've been resetting the target of the company with some more disciplined execution, and making sure that we get a return on investment with our staffing, and a return on investment for every dollar we spend. So we've had a fairly large change. The whole board we changed. I don't think the ink's dry on most of our business cards, mine in particular. I used to lead the research and development part of the business as the Chief Operating Officer, and then about 9 weeks ago we had a bit of a board change of CEO, and the rest of my team you see on the right hand side there have all been part of the journey while we've been developing all this stuff. And you know, I did an MBO to bring Europcar to Australia, you know, unfortunately 20 years ago or something. And I thought I had a pretty good management team then in those days, and we grew that business. In the beginning, we started with 1,000 cars, and I want to say we had 5,000 cars in the first 18 months, and we were number 3 actually in the country in the first couple of years. So my guys in those days really knew their stuff. And I would say that my current team maybe know their stuff even better. So in our case, I think our business model for investment is actually pretty easy, because in the end, you've only really got to believe 3 or 4 things. You've got to believe that power's going up. Well, that's easy. You've got to believe that people with a 30-year product life, if you're building a building, are going to be happy with a payback that's 4 years or less. And then you've got to believe that the way that the government regulatory environment will be as we approach these targets for net zero, that this regulatory environment is going to support our business. And I think that's pretty clear. So I would say to you that it's really hard to explain all the detail of the technology and why we're better and why we can do stuff that other people can't. But I'd encourage you, if you ever want to be interested in that, or you're interested to invest, welcome to come, and we will give you a technical walkthrough in our showroom. And I think once you have that, you get a picture of where we're going and where we are in terms of the global market. Thank you.